Okay, so I think we have enough people. Let us get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Chu. I'm the VP of Product at Unravel. As part of the founding team, I've been with Unravel since its inception and led product engineering from performance optimization on Hadoop, Spark, and various SQL engines to cost optimization across Databricks, Snowflake, BigQuery, and so on. My background is in database with a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So optimization on the modern data stack is my natural habitat. Joining me today, we have Prajakta, our head of AI. Prajakta, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Prajakta, head of AI at Unravel. And my work actually sits at the intersection of AI systems and deploying those systems in the real world with our Fortune 500 customers. And right now, I'm focused on rolling out our agentic actionability system called RVIX across these customers. So a day in my life is typically like finding the time to fit the gap between what AI recommends and what actually gets done in production. So by way of background, I have a PhD in resource efficiency from Duke University. So cost and waste optimization is something I have thought about deeply over the years from a research angle. And more recently, I have kind of layered this with a product growth strategy perspective, thanks to the MBA from Oxford University. So, in a way, when I talk about FinOps, it's a kind of a mix of a technical as well as the business outcome side, I think, which is exactly what this conversation is about today.
Very cool. So before we talk about why we want to do this series, let me give a quick intro to Unravel. It started doing performance optimization on the Hadoop stack about 10 years ago and expanded into Spark and various SQL engines like Hive, Redshift, Athena, Impala, etc. And when our customers and other companies started moving their workloads to the cloud, cost quickly became their number one pain point. And since cost is a function of how efficiently they run workloads on the cloud, we also started supporting FinOps to optimize cost and performance. On the modern data and AI stack, that includes Databricks, Snowflake, and BigQuery. So now we want to start a series on FinOps for the modern data stack because we are at another inflection point where the increasing use of AI is going to make cost an even more challenging problem than ever. Over the last few years, we saw people have a much better understanding of the cost challenges, and FinOps tools in general have come a long way. However, in many companies, cost is far from a fixed problem, and the use of AI is a double-edged sword that could help control costs and lead to a cost explosion. So we wanted to do this webinar where we talk about the common FinOps approaches and the limitations. And the one common denominator of these limitations is the execution gap. And we'll discuss how Unravel addresses these limitations and bridge the execution gap. And then we'll close with upcoming topics in this series.
Very cool. So Eric, I think let's try this, right? I mean, wanted to ask some questions around the topics that you were mentioning. So let's start with a very common one that we see in most of the customers having these problems. So everybody has observability platforms, multiple dashboards, timely alerting and notification. What do you think is wrong with them?
There's nothing wrong with it. Anything you do to improve cost, the first stage is observability. You need to know what's going on before you fix the problem. By now, almost every platform has some kind of observability, as well as tons of FinOps tools that provide observability. And among all these tools, it depends on, we have to look at how deep they go. A lot of the tools, they only show you billing data, for example, where you can spot the chargeback at the account level or you see the cost spike. But a lot of the root causes for the cost spike occur at the app level or resource level, which the billing resources don't show. And even when you're looking at observability platforms that do show you the usage of apps and different users, it doesn't tell you exactly what is causing the spike in the usage and the time. So basically, it gives you good identification, but it doesn't tell you the root cause.
Got it. So you mentioned about resources, right? Most of the customers and even the people we meet in the community always talk about compute right sizing. And
Mhm.
that one recommendation kind of seems pretty actionable, right? And there's auto suspending, warehouse right sizing. So why doesn't it solve the cost problem?
It does. Compute right sizing is actually one of the lowest hanging fruits that you can do to quickly reduce cost. When you pay for Databricks and Snowflake and BigQuery, etc., a big part of the cost is from the compute, which is a function of what is the size of the compute resource you use and the duration of it. So by observing what is the usage pattern and right fitting to that, you can actually cut the underutilization and cut cost as a result, right? And in fact, a lot of FinOps tools today do provide that function. But it only goes so far. If your workload has a lot of inefficiencies, then you're right sizing the compute resources will only right fit whatever these inefficient apps require, right? So once you get to that point, it's hard to further reduce your cost. So what we want to do is to actually take a holistic approach of understanding where your inefficiencies occur. Besides compute right sizing, there are other areas of opportunities such as app level optimization, workload level optimization, and storage optimization.
Got it. So I think when we look at these problems, right, especially recommendations like query rewrites or code suggestions, do you think AI pilots or AI co-pilots, sorry, can contribute there? Does that feel different and more intelligent? Like, how would you break that down?
Yeah, definitely. I think AI copilots address a very important use case, which is the individual users trying to improve their queries. A lot of the users that write these apps, like SQL or Spark, they may not be experts in cost and performance optimization, or they may not even be mindful of it, right? So they just want to get their tasks done to get something out of the code, but they're not thinking whether it is the most efficient way of doing something. So certainly with AI copilots, now they have an easy way through natural language to ask, hey, maybe optimize this for me. What could be wrong? But they have to also be the judge of looking at the result and determining whether the response is correct, makes sense, or do the same thing as what they intend. Since a lot of these users, especially like if they don't have a SQL background, and like they come from a data science background or business analyst, then they don't even they need help to write the queries in the first place. It's a high order to expect them to also be the reviewer of these recommendations. So what Unravel does is we would actually help them with both the coming up with the right query and also validating the recommendation for them, so they don't have to worry about the inefficiencies themselves.
Got it. So, this is a very curious question that I at least many a times face during our customer interactions, right? So, every customer or every data platform team will have their own in-house tooling, right? And isn't that a natural choice if they want to like build out their own recommendations or internal optimization platform?
Yeah, that's always the question of whether you want to buy something or you want to build in-house. And building requires you to have the domain expertise. Now, AI somewhat lowers the bar. It's easier to build your own tool. But still, what I just said, it basically applies about an individual user using Cortex or other LLM to optimize their own workload. Now you have to do the same approach to optimize the whole company's workload and storage and infrastructure. So it's a lot more challenges that you have to take on. And if you have to, if a company also uses multiple platforms, which is very common, as we see from our customers, then you have to build this across various platforms and make them work together seamlessly.
Got it. So what we have seen so far, what you're describing basically are like four different problems and different approaches towards solving them. Do you think there is any internal thread connecting all of them together?
I think the common denominator for all of these approaches is that at the end of the day, if you don't act on the recommendation, you are still not going to get any real savings. So the execution gap, this what we call, is the final and the biggest challenge of the whole FinOps journey. How do you actually get these act on these recommendations and track the ROI, the realized ROI? So since we are on the topic of execution gap, maybe Prajakta, I have a question for you. Now, data teams have more tools than ever, monitoring, alerts, AI assistants. So why is spend still going up quarter over quarter, as you discover when you talk to prospects and customers?
Yeah, I think, see, the one way to look at it is that the tools have done a splendid job so far, right? Visibility, in a way, the way I have seen it in the industry, I feel it is genuinely solved. Observability is not like a problem anymore, as I think we also keep emphasizing in some way that observability is dead and actionability is the new form that it has taken. So you can see exactly what is wrong, and anybody can do that today, pulling up recommendations with AI, where the waste is, where the queries are getting inefficient, and which clusters are oversized, and so on. So the gap, as such, is not in the knowledge anymore. It is, I think, primarily in the distance between a issue that gets flagged and a fix that's actually deployed into production. And that distance, as per the experience that I have, is getting much wider than people realize. So think about what it actually takes to act on a single, let's say, Databricks recommendation, right? So the cluster configurations kind of live in YAML files or managed through asset bundles. They might be versioned in Git, gated by a CI/CD pipeline, and any change that you have to do has to pass through your complete organization's change management policy, right? Before it actually goes and touches the production. And that's not one step, that is like five steps bundled into one, or at least that seems like one. And each one of those steps actually requires someone with the right context, the right authorization, the right access, and even the right understanding to go ahead and implement the change, right? I think even in Snowflake and all, you must be seeing that warehouse right sizing or resizing isn't just a setting change, right? It is easy to recommend what settings need to be changed. But imagine the ecosystem where it is governed by a linked service configuration, right? It can be tied to a cost center policy and require sign off from the FinOps teams who work on a completely different cycle. Maybe they are 2 weeks ahead of you and so on in terms of cost optimization or understanding. So the recommendations fire on a certain day, but by the time somebody actually goes ahead and navigates the actual ecosystem that they have to go through, the asset bundles, the YAMLs, the PRs, the policy reviews, the deployment windows, and the cadences, and so on, it's easily 3 to 4 weeks down the line, and the workload has already been running thousands of times, if not more. I think we have much worse examples than that at some of our customers, right? So the spend has kind of compounded over time, and closing that gap is what right now we are trying to focus it unravel, right? So not just like surfacing the recommendations, because that's the easier part, all said and done, but making it so trustworthy and rock solid that a validated, safe fix kind of gets applied without requiring any engineer to manually carry it through all the layers that I was describing earlier. So when you close that execution gap, that spend actually starts moving into the right direction. Not just because you have a better insight, but because I think that insight has finally made its way into an action automatically that helps you get into the whole realized savings arena.
Mm. So do you think AI can help here, or is it more of a double-edged sword that could also lead to high cost?
That's an interesting one. So, see, the opportunity with AI is definitely real, right? I mean, as a head of AI, I cannot vouch more than that, right? But you have to see how AI is basically being used or can be used as well. So, AI can definitely help you identify the optimization opportunities, but doing that at scale and at a speed no human team could match is something that we are seeing it now across the board. And it can even do it continuously, right? Nobody's going to get tired writing down those heuristics anymore. And it's not about just the doing the quarterly reviews, because now the scale at which the recommendations are generated, the risk is that if AI only keeps on improving the recommendation layer and keeps on generating smarter and smarter insights and recommendations, it doesn't move the realized savings number. So I'll give you some examples that we have been seeing in the past few months, right? So AI Copilot can rewrite a Databricks SQL query and it looks like great. That's awesome. But that query is now embedded into a job defined into some kind of a bundle. The bundle might be controlled via Git. Somebody else needs to validate that, or the job might have upstream dependencies before you could even touch it, right? So if the AI that is giving you a rewrite suggestion doesn't understand that complete context and the ecosystem that you are operating in, you still have to do the validation work yourself. And that is not a, that actually takes up the majority of the chunk of your whole troubleshooting and recommendation adoption kind of a life cycle, right? So at Unravel, we term this as the insight life cycle, end to end. Take another scenario, right? The warehouse example, like AI will flag a virtual warehouse is consistently over provisioned. But the warehouse is now configured to the link service. Now, do you have the permissions? Is that a shared pipeline? Which teams are dependent on it? What if you resize it? And what if runs later, three queries later, things just break, right? Who's monitoring that? And so on. So the dependency is not in understanding the recommendations or applying or wanting to apply it. It is actually the incident itself that doesn't end up saving you money, right? So the sword that you're talking about kind of cuts the right way when AI doesn't stop at giving the suggestion. When it understands the structure end to end that it operates in and can validate a change as well, thinking about the human approvals needed for which recommendations it can proceed autonomously versus for which recommendations it might need a human approval gate and so on. That is when AI actually starts bridging that gap and closing the loop, right? So on that note, actually at Unravel, when we were designing RVIX, our autonomous actionability agentic ecosystem, that was the primary design principle, to have an AI that actually understands the full execution context and also acts within the boundaries, the guardrails, right? Not just advice from outside, because the value is not in just giving out the recommendations anymore. It is the actual ROI or the savings that you get or can prove month over month in your cloud bill.
Let me follow up on that. What changes when an AI system has full context, not just one dimension, but queries, pipelines, compute, storage together?
Yeah, so see, with so many entities and telemetry data over the period of time that is made available to us, right? And the context completeness brings, or is rather the whole difference between the suggestion that you can actually give out, uh, the need for doing a validation yourself, or the system that can validate it for you, right? That is where the whole uniqueness of RVIX lies. So when you let's say for a query level, you only have a query level context. A rewrite of that query might look good in isolation, that, hey, makes sense, looks good, feels right, right? But because RVIX now has that complete end-to-end downstream pipeline dependencies, It knows that something can spike the storage cost if you fix this and so on, which you wouldn't yourself be tracking, or you wouldn't have the complete visibility, or might miss it out when you're doing things manually, right? That is where the whole complete context kind of helps out. We get the context for the workloads, we get the context for the infrastructure, the storage, and Arvix can model the second or the third order effects of the change before it touches anything in any environment for that matter, right? So actually, when I was doing the PhD on the resource efficiency, that's one of the classical systems problem. So you cannot optimize a subsystem without understanding the whole system around it, right? That's exactly what most of the FinOps tools out there in the market are doing today. They are doing subsystem optimization with no view of the whole, right? So Unravel's approach is kind of different here, that we bring all of that context into place, and that too for multiple platforms. So the AI is kind of reasoning about the whole system when it makes a decision, goes back into multiple iterations before deciding that, hey, although this might not be the most cost-effective one, but this one will stand the test of time because this recommendation considers XYZ other factors which your goal doesn't necessarily meet in isolation.
And I
So
want to
yeah.
add that at the org level, it's also not just the context is not just within one platform. It could be across different platforms that leads to new insights and new possibilities of optimizing, such as picking which platform to run certain types of workload. That's not possible if you're just looking at one platform.
Totally, totally. And see, that is where the whole autonomous execution kind of works out really well with Unravel because of the whole multiple platform visibility, right? So, Eric,
Mhm.
on that note, right, on the autonomous execution side, let's talk about what autonomous data platform operations today actually look like in practice. Does that phrase um, encompass a lot of things?
Yeah, and now we're talking about the real world challenges. So it sounds all nice and sunny when we talk about recommendation. When we actually apply, we see a lot of challenges in practice. I would say there's no one size fits all approach. We often depend because we work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies over a decade from the Hadoop times to now. So we see that every company has pretty much a different approach. And so we also have to cater to, because our job is to facilitate what they're doing to help get the maximum gain. So I would characterize what we do in practice as like two dimension. One, the first dimension is depending on the type of insights. So for some insights like warehouse right sizing or any kind of configuration-based recommendation, it would be easier for us to do the auto apply. We just need the permission, and then we could do the auto apply with the option for them to accept and reject changes easily. So that's been very popular, and that's also why I mentioned earlier that right sizing compute is a low-hanging fruit because of the relative low effort. Now, when you move to code, in practice, most companies would not feel comfortable to let you automatically let a third party to change the code. They would want to review it. So we are not trying to fight against the actual owners of the code. We are trying to help them. So what they find really popular is that we Unravel would integrate with their CI/CD system so that the actionability in this case is in the form of helping these developers see the recommendation in their natural habitat. For example, in the GitHub code review, when they do the pull requests, it automatically triggers calls to get Unravel recommendation so that they could prevent bad code from going into production. They could make those changes before applying and move the code to production. So as you see, depending on different types of actions, it requires different involvement. So here we provide different approaches. And the other part about actionability that I want to talk about is that is very different at each company is the business unit, the context. So
Hmm.
that, of course, is we built it and we have a different context at each different company. And often that is uh, based on that, we have to provide the mapping to alert the right team. Well, where when you if you just look at the Databricks or the Snowflake workload, it's often not easy to figure out what is the right business unit. So that's
Hmm.
something extra that Unravel can provide. And and then the other part is the all the big companies that we've worked with, they have different requirements that is beyond just cost and performance optimization. For example, sensitive data protection, what choices of LM that they allow their teams to use. So that's the part where when it comes to autonomous data platform operations, we have to cater to their requirements. And that's the part where we are really experienced just because we have worked with so many companies in the past decade.
Okay.
So now, one aspect that I want to also bring up is the validation of it, right? Because we AI, one common concern is, oh, AI hallucinates, or if you don't even if you're not a domain expert in the first case and you just ask AI some question, chances are you just have to trust the results unless you know what you are asking. So wouldn't the same question apply to Unravel if we just allow Unravel to do this with auto recommendation? Then how can we trust Unravel? In other words, maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. I think so far this is the most important question in the whole conversation, right? See, the trust is the real barrier to close the execution gap. It is much more than finding the directly responsible individual who should be doing the right kind of reviews or giving the approvals and so on. That is, I think, still much more easier. And As we see across the board, many teams that have been burned kind of, by the bad suggestions, especially from LLMs or the in-house co-pilots that they have built, some tools that they have used or third-party vendors. Every time they come across a bad suggestion like that, they kind of develop some, fear or skepticism that that's completely rational. Now, they have learned that a suggestion that actually looks good on paper, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to run safely in their environment, right? And I'm pretty sure you must be seeing the same thing across the customers that you are interacting with. So the way Unravel handles the whole validation approach for every recommendation is basically it's more like empirical rather than being probabilistic, right? So it's not the model is 90% confident that this is a better recommendation, right? We basically run the rewrite against the actual queries, query profiles. We run it across matching scenarios and simulated patterns and so on before we actually confirm that the output is going to be identical and it is going to lower the cost, right? Even for our cluster recommendations and any other recommendations that Unravel suggests, let's say in storage or config changes and so on, validation for the entity for which we are generating the recommendation and the action that it is going to take takes a whole different meaning. And for every such recommendation, the approach for validation that we have taken is quite different. So in some cases, it might mean modeling the downstream impact before applying. In some cases, it might mean that for this recommendation, you have to get a human approval uh, to be able to execute it once. But after you execute it once, you kind of learn from that behavior and then adapt automatically, right? So even in storage cases, so you're not cleaning up storage that turns out to be referenced by a pipeline that you didn't know about, right? So in a way, the practical effect is that when a recommendation kind of reaches an engineer for review or an approval, it already has an evidence attached to it. So we don't just generate the recommendations and give a list of 500 to an engineer and say, hey, approve all of these to get the savings or the performance improvements that you desire. That validation is something that comes along with the recommendation that Unravel generates, right? And that changes the complete conversation from should I trust the recommendation to am I equipped to approve this, right? So, which is a much faster and a lower friction decision, even for the recommendations that need a human in the loop approach.
So we talk about various kinds of recommendations, and I know that in practice we can see hundreds and even thousands of recommendations. So what would you tell someone if they are sitting on a backlog of 100 of these optimization tickets? How do they actually get them done in real life? What's the one thing that you would tell them?
Got it. So, see, the way we do it at the moment is it can be overwhelming when you see those hundreds of recommendations land in your inbox or in the Unravel review panel and so on, right? So, one way is you prioritize it based on impact and effort. So, for example, not all of the 100 tickets are equal, right? Trying to work through them in order on how backlogs kind of stay backlogs, right? But I think more importantly, when you're doing those reviews manually, you have to recognize that if you're working through them one by one on your own, the list is always going to regenerate faster than you can clear it. So, because Unravel kind of refreshes the recommendations with a cadence and so on, you will keep on getting that backlog of reviews. And the goal here is not to empty the backlog. It is in a way to build a system where the high impact changes kind of make their way on priority, or you trust the system to handle things automatically so that the backlog stops growing. So many of our customers, for example, what they do today is they will start out with the top 20 recommendations, do the reviews, the recommendations which are pending for review, right? And then they see the savings for a week, and then they build that trust, and then they give kind of a blanket approval to act on the similar recommendations of that type to let the Arvix autonomous system handle it on its own, right? And that approach typically works, and sometimes it is 30 or 40% of the list, and nobody even requires to touch anything else apart from those few recommendations, while the rest of it is taken care of.
And I also want to add that Unravel recommendation often comes with estimated savings. And we also have recommendations about the effort involved. So some of them are easier to apply and those would be ranked higher.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely, Eric. Thanks for pointing that out, right?
Yeah.
So
Um,
Eric, just to wrap this up, what do you think is like coming up next in this series? What kind of other webinars or educational videos can our customers expect going forward?
yeah, I definitely want to follow up with you talking more about more deeply on the AI and the validation mechanics, how we handle query rewrite at scale safely, and where most of the interesting engineering challenges live. Um, So the other area that I want to talk about is customer case studies. Well, we cannot review the names, but we can go through some really interesting real world examples where we have achieved real savings. So stay tuned. And with that, let us move to some questions to see. Let's see if there are any questions from the audience. Uh, so that's one. Okay, let me read it out loud. So Snowflake in the recent Snowflake Summit announced Cocoa. So how is Unravel different from that? So Snowflake announced Cocoa, which stands for Cortex Code and also Cowork, right? So they are mainly built for users that individually interacting with Snowflake to issue natural language prompt to get them to do something, right? That doesn't have to be optimize a query, but they can use Coco to build the query, build the workload, and then in the process they can ask, right? The use case scenario is really designed for these interaction between individual users, whereas Unravel is a holistic FinOps solution that it's proactively purpose-built for FinOps to proactively look for opportunities to optimize the cost and performance as well. So users don't need to issue prompt, and they don't need to worry about whether Cortex is doing what they intend, whether the result is good or not, and they don't need to validate because Unravel does it all for you. As we mentioned earlier, it even comes back with a prioritized list of action items. And what really separates Unravel from using Cortex is the actionability aspect of it. That Unravel is designed to help you act on the recommendations to achieve real savings. And not to mention, the obvious one is Unravel supports cross-platform. So if your company uses a combination of Snowflake and Databricks and BigQuery and more, then you want a single pane of glass view to observe and manage and govern your cloud resources.
Yeah, I think that's a question that leads to the second one that we have here. So there's another question on what platforms do you support?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Databricks, Snowflake, GCP, those are the main platforms that we support now because they're the most popular, most commonly used. We also support EMR and from legacy work, Hadoop, but now it's less common, but we still have customers that have been using them and evolved their data stack along with us over these years. So we still have to maintain Hadoop for them. So yeah, but the main new ones going on are the big three: Databricks, Snowflake, and GCP, especially BigQuery within GCP.
Got it.
Cool. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks.